Bad decisions can often lead to disastrous consequences, and horror movies are absolutely full of them. We've all seen dumb characters make the wrong choice over and over again, leaving us screaming at the screen, "Why are you doing this?" And with that in mind, I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are the 8 dumbest decisions in paranormal horror movies. Number 8, entering an asylum where people died. Grave Encounters 2. Grave Encounters is one of the many found footage horror offerings that capitalized on the success of Paranormal Activity in the early 2010s. And the first is surprisingly solid despite how it may look, and the second picks up directly where that left off, focusing on a group of fans who follow in the footsteps of the ill-fated characters from the previous movie. Here, film student Alex Wright and his friends set out to prove that Grave Encounters was actually real, and to do this they break into an abandoned asylum that they believe caused the deaths of the previous crew. Now, just to make things a little bit clear, not only do they enter a creepy location on their own volition, but they do so already with the belief that it killed people, all to just prove their point. And it goes about as well as you would expect, as once they enter the asylum, they are soon picked off one by one by the area's malevolent entities. This all culminates with Alex killing his girlfriend as he promises the spirits to finish his film because it'll actually attract more people to the hospital. Now this means that not only does Alex cause the death of his friends, but he's going to lure even more people to their own demises. Number 7, resurrecting your child. Pet Sematary. Stephen King's Pet Sematary focuses on the Creed family as they move to Maine. They soon discover behind their property lies a burial ground that has the power to resurrect the dead, but of course with dangerous side effects. When tragedy strikes though, one of the family members uses the cemetery, but to quote the film, sometimes dead is better. The first burial is the family's cat Church, who comes back with a pretty foul demeanor. The next happens when the Creed's son Gage is killed in a vehicular accident, and his grief-stricken father Lewis buries the boy in the cemetery despite having already seen what happened to their cat and the warnings given to him by neighbor Judd. Soon after, of course, the resurrected Gage wreaks havoc and kills Judd as well as his own mother Rachel. But Lewis still hasn't learned his lesson and decides to then bury his wife as well. Finally, the undead Rachel puts a stop to her husband's madness and stabs him with a knife in the film's closing moments. Now, Pet Sematary is actually pretty great at tackling loss and how grief can overwhelm people, but as seen through Lewis's actions, his pain leads to disastrous consequences for pretty much everyone around him. Number 6, investigating the serial killer's hideout. Jeepers Creepers. Jeepers Creepers focuses on siblings Trish and Derry Jenner, who soon encounter the titular Creeper, a vicious monster and initially assumed serial killer while on the road. What starts out as a trip to spring break soon ends up with a night filled with tragedy, which is all caused by Derry's own actions. See, when the siblings encounter an aggressive truck driver on the road, the vehicle stops by an abandoned church. A spooky man then gets out and starts dumping bodies below a steel pipe. Now, I know what you're thinking. They would see this, they'd call the police, and then just hightail it out of there, right? Well, you're dead wrong, because instead, Derry convinces his sister to turn around so he can actually go and stick his head into this pipe, eventually ending up at the bottom in a cave that is quite literally covered top to bottom in sewn-up corpses. This, of course, inadvertently puts them into the sights of the supernatural being for the rest of the movie, and results in Derry's eventual death. So yeah, just a bit of advice. If you see anyone dumping bodies down a big shaft, don't jump down the shaft with them. Number 5, drugging your own daughter in Nightmare on Elm Street 4: The Dream Master. A Nightmare on Elm Street 4: The Dream Master continues where the third film left off and has Freddy Krueger return to hunt down the last children of Elm Street, namely Kristen Parker, Ronald Kincaid, and Joey Cruzel. At the start of the film, Freddy is resurrected, because of course he is, and immediately kills off Kincaid and Joey. Kristen then finds out about her friends' gruesome fates and plans on confronting the burnt killer once and for all. But the rematch is cut short when Kristen's mother Elaine decides to relieve her daughter's stress stress by drugging her with sleeping pills. Now, questionable ethics aside, and those are pretty questionable ethics, this gives Krueger his needed revenge as Kristen falls asleep in the dream world where he corners her. Despite the dream powers she acquired in the previous film, she loses to Freddy, who has become too much to handle even for her. Helpless and overwhelmed, Kristen is then thrown into the boiler and burnt alive. Elaine's decision, despite coming maybe from a place of concern from her daughter, causes the death of the last Elm Street kid. Thankfully, Kristen passes her powers down to Alice Johnson, who then becomes the titular Dream Master. And yeah, if you're keeping track, that's 2 for the titular count of this episode so far, so let's see how many we get to by the end. Number 4, facing your fears at the worst time, Insidious. In Insidious, the Lambert family is terrorized by a paranormal entity known as the Lipstick-Faced Demon, who captures a young Dalton and places him in the Further, a realm full of tortured souls. His father Josh, not me thank God, who had experienced similar events as a boy, then ventures out to save his son. Josh manages to make it to the Further and then rescues his son despite the overwhelming odds. But before they can escape, he encounters the Bride in Black, who aim to possess him as a child. And so he then inexplicably decides to overcome his fears at the worst possible moment. He yells at the demon and asks her to take him rather than his son, but keep in mind, he and Dalton were so close to the exit when he just decided to act brave in front of this ghost. His choice backfires on him big time though, as the Bride in Black gains control of Josh, and the film ends with the possessed man killing Elise, the family's supernatural expert. Number 3, reading the book Evil Dead 2013. One of the biggest suspensions of disbelief in the original Evil Dead was the frankly insane choice to stay at the creepy secluded cabin. Thankfully, the 2013 remake remedied this by making the group stay there in order to help Mia overcome her drug addiction. But not all dumb decisions were excluded, as seen in the character of Eric. Upon discovering a basement full of dead animals and a book wrapped in barbed wire, Eric's curiosity gets the better of him. He then reads the text out loud despite all the warnings and pages containing graphic and violent images. This then awakens a malevolent force that possesses the group one by one and gets them killed in extremely painful ways. Eric is portrayed as your standard skeptic and is a teacher, so his curiosity is kind of rewarded here. But reading a demonic book surrounded by dead animals is just asking for trouble, in my opinion. The film is savvy enough to know that the audience might blame Eric for this though, and so he receives the brunt of the punishment throughout the movie. Number 2, just everything to do with Mika. Paranormal Activity. Paranormal Activity focuses on Katie, who has been haunted by the supernatural ever since she was a child. To discover the source of her fears, her boyfriend Mika sets up numerous cameras around the house, but ends up being one of the most unlikable characters in horror history. And that is saying something. First and foremost, they consult a psychic who tells them not to contact the entity, yet this idiot boyfriend ignores the warning and constantly antagonizes the demon at every given opportunity. When Katie makes him promise not to buy a Ouija board to contact the spirit, he circumvents this by borrowing one instead, because hey, he technically didn't buy one. Throughout the film, he is a rather self-centered and pretty terrible partner, all things told, and rather than find a way to solve his girlfriend's predicament, he is more concerned about filming footage, and even by the time that he does take the situation seriously, it's too late as he's then just killed. His entire personality in this movie makes him one of the genre's most frustrating characters, with his skepticism and toxic behavior towards his partner. So by the time we do get to his demise, it's kind of hard to feel sorry for the guy. Number 1, making a voodoo doll of yourself. Child's Play. In the original Child's Play, serial killer Charles Lee Ray is mortally wounded and then transfers his soul into a good guy doll named Chucky. He soon sets his sights on the men who wronged him, while also tormenting Karen Barkley and her son Andy. During an encounter with Detective Mike Norris, Chucky finds himself bleeding like a human, so decides to seek the aid of John Dr. Death Bishop, the man who taught him voodoo in the first place. His former colleague plans on calling the cops though, and makes the fatal mistake of letting Chucky know that he has a voodoo doll of himself. Naturally, our killer redhead uses that knowledge and takes the object to torture John for information, and eventually just kills him with it. Now, first of all, maybe teaching a serial killer the art of voodoo might not be the wisest choice. And secondly, isn't having a voodoo doll of yourself just kinda asking for trouble? I mean, why make one at all? The Child's Play series often has goofy elements when it comes to the supernatural aspect, which is why the sequels take a more tongue-in-cheek approach rather than straight-up horror, so this is still pretty funny, admittedly. So, that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. What do you think of these decisions in these horror movies? And are there any dumb ones I missed off here? Let me know, and while you're down there, could you please give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to whatculture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.